Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Economic Development Committee. I'm here joined by Councilor Gathers, Councilors Green, and Councilor Schultz. Few rules: this is a public meeting, not a public hearing. That means the councilors will ask questions, the presenters will present, and if I need to, I'll recognize some people from the audience. But this is basically for the council to gather information about this particular project. And I guess I also want to mention that we are under a sort of a time restriction here. I want to keep this, try to keep this in an hour because we have a big agenda at the study session of the Common Council. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jen, to start.
I'm actually going to have the Deputy Mayor do a quick introduction.
I'm going to be very quick because the meat of the matter is our guests here who are here to present. Just to again walk us through how we got here today. Councilor Hogan was a part of that process, but just want to review that again. So everyone here understands and remembers the blight of the developmental center on Wilbur Ave for decades in this community. It is a 48-acre parcel in the city of Syracuse in the Tip Hill neighborhood, and it has been a blight on that neighborhood for decades, as well as the entire city. The state and their facility operated for many years, and then they closed it and left us with that $600,000 facility, 600,000 square foot facility. We have, in 2019, we all remember when we all collectively took the bold step of taking possession of it, because something had to happen with it. And in 2019, we did that. To date, between codes, police, economic development, our DPW, we have been maintaining it. It is no surprise to anyone that not only is the building a blight, but also the activities that happen in that building are a burden for the safety of the people on the site illegally, as well as the neighborhood and the community. We spent approximately $57,000 to date maintaining it, not to count even the hours that have been focused on there. In January, we hired Pyramid Brokerage Company. We felt the expertise of their part of Cushman Wakefield provided flexibility. Instead of us issuing an RFP, we brought on the expertise of a broker company. Over that course of that process, we had 4 serious offers, and we call them serious offers because those offers demonstrated ability for finance and the redevelopment chops to get this thing done. That committee comprised of counselors, it comprised of members of the administration, neighborhood representatives, state economic development representatives, and the developers who presented to each of us and evaluated. We evaluated their proposals. The most viable offer came from a team comprised of the Albanese organization, and that is proposing, again, what we're looking at that 48-acre site is pretty much divided in half: a housing development project and an economic development project. What we're talking about today is the housing development project. There are questions regarding whether or not this proposal and what we're looking at for that development is what's best for the city. We believe absolutely it is. An important piece to this and questions that have come up, and a significant portion of this is $29 million that was committed by New York State and the governor in particular. Make no mistake, we asked for that commitment from the state. They asked for why we needed the commitment from the state. We proposed the development plan for what we wanted to do on the site and explained that we had a $600,000 monstrosity standing in the way of that development. And that resulted in their commitment of $29 million to get that thing out of the way.
I don't mean to interrupt you here, but I just want to make sure that we're all aware. Are you saying that the state is going to clean it predicated on us developing the way it's been presented to these folks?
What I'm saying is the state did not present $29 million to us just because they were presenting it. they asked us why we needed help. We were either going to have to bond for the demolition of that property or seek state assistance. We sought state assistance and presented to them why we needed to demolish it, because we had both the economic development portion of the plan and the housing development of the plan. That is what we presented to the state.
Okay. So is there any kind of so there is a stipulation. Are you saying there is a stipulation that the development has to go this way, or otherwise they're not going to clean it up?
They presented $29 million to us based on the project that we presented to them.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for the government.
I go back a little farther, you know, in the early 2000s, when the state abandoned this site and then sold it to a downstate developer who basically didn't do anything.
You and I are in complete agreement about that.
We're aware of that. So maybe I thought maybe this was like sort of an ethical win for us. They actually recognize that, you know, that maybe this is their property and they should clean it up.
I would think so, but please don't make me answer that question on a hot mic.
Okay. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine, Counselor. So the other thing I would like the Counselor to just make sure you understand is that this agreement is the first step in many steps. Just like any other development project, Albanese will, because of their experience, put together the details of every component of the housing project after they know that we have an agreement. Now, every component of that has to come back to us so that we can vet what we like or don't like about it. And there is contingencies in the agreement that allows us to back out if what is presented to us we don't feel is what's best for the city of Syracuse, and particularly that neighborhood. And so with that, I'm going to get out of the way, because the people you need to talk to more than me are Albanese, and so I introduce to you Chris Albanese, CEO.
Chris, do you want to sit up here at the table with me?
Thank you, Mr. Albanese. And if you could just introduce who you're with, and also where your company's headquartered in New Jersey, correct?
No, Long Island.
Long Island?
New York. Michael Ritz, Senior Vice President of the company, Head of Acquisitions. He's going to be making the presentation with me, and my attorney's here. Kevin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Kevin Fuller, Don Shankin King, and Brody Smith with Don Shankin King.
I know both you characters from the OSIDA, so.
And I'll just ask anyone else who is not at the table that presents to come to the mic, because we are streaming. Thank you.
We put together a quick slide presentation just to introduce ourselves, what we've built, and our experience. First, I'll tell you a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about the company. We've been in business for over 70 years. We develop apartment buildings, office buildings, schools. We've built hotels. We do our own management leasing. We're about 50 people. The company is owned by myself and my cousin, Russell Albanese. Our fathers had started this company in the 40s when they were kids. Our focus is New York and New Jersey. We've built 5-6 million square feet plus of apartments, office space, etc. I've been in business developing 25 to 30 years. My cousin Russell Albanese has been developing 40 years plus. We're very involved with all the projects. We don't take on more projects than we can handle. We've never had a failed project, which most developers who have been developing for 70 years can't say that. We've never defaulted on a loan in 70 years. Again, I'm not sure I know any developers who can say that. We're very committed to this project, and I'll have Mike take you through some examples of what we've built that shows our skills and expertise.
Thanks, Chris. we're going to run through some slides here, and then obviously we'll get to the specific project here in Syracuse, but wanted to give a flavor for some of the things that we've done, a little bit more of the profile of the company through some examples of projects, and then specifically talk about a project in the suburbs of Long Island that we think has a lot of sort of natural similarities to what this opportunity and this project could be here in Syracuse. And, you know, when I think of this project, I think of a handful of neighborhoods we've been in, and the way we're looking at this. And again, as Chris mentioned, the company has a long history, but not just as a company, but also as owners in the neighborhoods we're in. And we tend to do multiple buildings, multiple projects in the same community, or frankly, sometimes even on the same street in different neighborhoods. And, you know, I think we always think of ourselves as community developers. We do a lot of public-private partnerships, which I'll walk you through as well. And then generally speaking, almost all the assets that we've developed, we still own, manage, and operate, you know, and employ people and kind of live and breathe in the communities that the either office, retail, or residential buildings are in. So, Eric, if you don't mind helping me, we're going to run through some of those. This is Garden City on Long Island. It's about 30 miles east of New York City. As Chris mentioned, we're headquarters here in one of the buildings. We've been in this neighborhood since the mid-'70s, and we're still headquartered there today. We own and operate 8 office and retail properties, all on the same street. This neighborhood is now a very affluent neighborhood, but the commercial corridor saw a lot of disruption in the 70s and 80s, and we were paramount in working with the community to create the Chamber of Commerce for the downtown revitalization, and again, you know, that goes on to this day.
Let me just add, most of the buildings that we bought there were empty when we bought them. Vacant retail, vacant office space. We built 2. The others were repositionings and converting vacant. One was a vacant department store, another was a vacant manufacturing building into, you know, Class A office space.
Again, now we can touch on a few neighborhoods in New York City, and again, these are all office buildings, residential buildings in Chelsea, which again, 20 years ago, when we first got into it, was an up-and-coming neighborhood. It was a lot of deserted manufacturing, a lot of parking lots, and we've been part of, you know, rebuilding that community over years. And again, these are both office assets and residential assets with retail that we still own and operate today, over 1 million square feet between these buildings combined.
One of them was a art museum. It's on the left. Not a large building, 40,000 feet, that went into bankruptcy. We bought it, we converted it into a Hewlett-Packard Tech Center. They occupied it for 15 years. Then they moved out, and we converted it into a school.
This is Barry Park City, which is state-owned land on a ground lease with the city, and so we built 3 large buildings, all residential, 2 rental buildings, 1 condo, again, well over a million feet combined here. And, you know, our partners on the project, you know, are the same partners we've had from the development till now. So we've been in this neighborhood over 20 years, again, on a ground lease with the city, being overseen by the Barry Park City Authority. One of the buildings there in the middle, we actually, in partnership with the state and Barry Park City Authority, built a 30,000 square foot office building within the residential building for Barry Park City Authority in partnership with them and the ground lease.
And we were at the forefront of green development. The Solaire was, and this was a big deal at the time, was the first residential tower in the country to get Gold LEED, and the Verdesian was the first residential tower in the country to get Platinum LEED. And we had news agencies from all over the world coming and touring these buildings at that time. And we maintain buildings that are energy efficient, environmentally friendly, etc.
Across the river on the New Jersey side in Jersey City, this is actually a reasonably new neighborhood for us. We started work here in about 2013. We now have 3 residential buildings, which you could see. The picture on the left is an actual picture. The other 2 on the right are renderings. All told, it'll be almost 2,000 apartment units. again, it's a neighborhood that we hadn't been in. We came in 2013. We were, continuing to build throughout, employing a lot of people in this neighborhood as well, ingraining ourselves in the neighborhood. The picture on the upper right is a very complicated project. It's a former abandoned rail yard, which was sort of a blighted former industrial use that ran through 6 blocks of a neighborhood, and it's privately owned, although there's a lot of public interest in it, given that it was former utility infrastructure for the city with the rail. And we're now working in partnership with the city to build housing on one portion of it and then donate back 6 of the blocks to the city to create a public park. So there's a big public-private partnership there. And again, that's a neighborhood that, for us, 10 years is not a long time. So we've been there less than 10 years. And again, with these assets and projects, I can imagine we'll be in that neighborhood for a long time, as we have. This is Wyandanch Village in Suffolk County, about 50 miles east of New York City on Long Island. This is a project that in the concepts of working with Jen and other city officials as we were evaluating the Syracuse opportunity here with the developmental center, we took a lot of similarities too. And in presentations that we had made to the city early on, we had used this as a comparison of what we think our experience can lead us to the design and development of what we can envision here in the mixed-use campus.
So this is an affordable Wyandanch Village, basically?
It's a combination.
Right, a combination?
We actually have a pie chart. So the first 2 buildings were 30-35% market rate, and the other 65-70 were different AMIs. The project was financed with through the state, New York State HFA. The ground floor was privately financed because it's retail. We're building. We just built a seniors building. Well, go ahead.
Yeah.
You continue.
Again, it's comparable to what we're looking at here, but not identical. But as a representative case study, we thought it's useful. And Wyandanch Village is really a master plan, is really what it is. And the land was taken over by the town of Babylon and Suffolk County. So this is, again, a big public-private partnership where the municipality owns the land. We have come in as a private developer, as the master developer here, and it's not just housing, but it's also the building of a park. It's on a train station, so there's a rebuilding and coordination of parking. We've done retail here, so it's really a mix of uses on a 40-acre campus. And Eric, we'll go through some images here, and so here you can just get a sense. It's left to right is the train track striping through it, but this is all told about a 40-acre campus. Eric, if you want to just keep going, because there's a number of slides here. This is the rendering of the master plan. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this is phase 1. So as Chris said, so far in phase 1, we've developed 2 residential buildings with retail below, a public park, which includes an ice skating rink in the wintertime between the two original buildings. We've built a 3rd residential building and a 4th building, which is a senior building. And in concert with the Long Island Railroad and the Suffolk County, they've rebuilt the train station, the platform, and the parking deck. So again, it's a master plan project, public-private partnership. This is one of the early renderings that we did of the residential buildings surrounding a to-be-built park. Again, which is all built now, and we can show some actual images. And again, it was a fairly blighted area, which is what led the county and the town to take over and acquire the land. Above it was a small retail strip and a lot of parking for the train, and below these are just Google Earth images. That's an actual view of 2 of the buildings surrounding the park. So again, this is given the size of the property, the public-private partnership nature, a park surrounding residential. Those are all things that we've been contemplating here for the Syracuse Development Center that mirror this. And we can go through this fairly quickly. There's a number of images here, and we'll give you a leave behind as well. But Eric, if you go back one, this is Building B. It was the 2nd residential building. You can see the park in the foreground, and again, it's one long building, but we took care in the design to craft it as if it looks like a downtown, creating walkability, creating mix of use, and we've varied the facades, as you can see here. And again, that design was also done in concert with the public committees that were formed within the Village of Wyandanch, and coordinating what, ultimately the project and the buildings would look like.
I say the picture doesn't do it justice. Architecture is very important to us. That is a beautiful building.
This is one of the most recent buildings we just completed earlier this year. This is a seniors building, and we have a partner that operates and provides services for seniors here. It's about 92 units. This is the third residential building. It's about 125 units. Keep going. Again, this is the public park that was built in between the two buildings, and there's a number of community events that, there's a formation of a non-for-profit park committee that oversees this, and we coordinate in concert with them. Here's one of the events we hold in the community during the winter, when a portion of the park, which is sort of a stage during the warmer months, we convert it into an ice skating rink in the winter. This is a community fair recently that we held, and again, the park committee, hosts these events in concert with us, and it's just part of the revitalization and sort of the development and activity that we create in this neighborhood.
How many people live there in Wyandanch Village?
There's, including the senior building, there's almost 400 units. So in total, it's probably, 500 to 600 people to date.
Wyandanch itself has a population of 15,000.
It's in West Babylon, right?
It's in the town of Babylon.
Town of Babylon.
Now, has the rail hub been there, or that was?
It was there. It was very decrepit.
But it was, so you worked in partnership with the state to get it?
Well, they rebuilt the station.
Because most of the, it's basically a lot of folks take the subway to go to work in the city, correct?
A lot, but given how far east it is, there are a lot of people who work in Suffolk County and Nassau County.
Okay.
We're very proud of the next building we're going to break ground on next year. There's no pictures of it here, which will be a Y and a medical office building. So when Mike showed you the park, there was a residential building on the right, a residential building on the left, and on the top will be the Y and medical office building. And we have a tenant lined up for the office building.
And these buildings are mixed.
Yeah, we have a chart. There's mixed income at all different AMI levels and market rate. So we have a chart that we'll get to, that you'll see all the percentages in these exact three residential
Because we'd like to
buildings.
see a chart of what's proposed up in Syracuse Developmental Center. We haven't seen that yet.
Right, so the way the contract is written now, it's subject to your approval. The mix in the buildings, we can't go forward unless you approve it.
And
But
that,
the first building, we can.
Well, that's not in the contract here we have right now.
Counselor, it is in the contract, and we can point it out. Let me
You
actually
don't
pull
have
it
a
up.
breakdown. I mean,
Yeah, we have not broken it down. We haven't designed the building yet.
Right,
We've
so-
just done the site plan.
So the purchase agreement basically enables us collectively to enter into a due diligence period, and that due diligence period will be 120 days. And several things happen in the due diligence period, but one of the things that happens is the Albanese organization, who's retained King & King Architects, comes up with a more detailed development plan. And then at the end of that due diligence period, or actually likely during the due diligence period, because I suspect it will be more of a collaborative process then, they go and work for 120 days and present something to us. But as a result of that additional planning that they'll do, they'll present us with a more detailed plan. And that's where we've built into the contract the ability for the city to approve that plan. And that's a condition of moving forward. So if we don't like the plan, then we can essentially get out of the deal. Obviously, our hope is that, we will get to a plan that we all agree on, because we've already spent the better part of 2 years marketing and
Here's the key question.
developing the
Does
site.
we include the common council?
So as of right now, in the purchase agreement, you'll see the responsibility falls to the administration to approve the plan. That is something we are open to negotiating with council. So, I think if you really would like to be directly involved in that and, and vote on that
I think it should be a
plan.
situation where the council approves it.
I think we're open to making that change.
Okay. Go on, Mr.
But thank you. Sorry,
Albany.
Chris.
Sorry,
So this is rendering of one of the apartments.
It's an actual picture.
I'm sorry, not a rendering, it's a picture. And whether someone makes 30% of AMI, 50, 80, 90, 100, or the market rate apartments, this is the apartment. They're beautiful apartments.
Again, just more interior images. These are all actual images of the buildings, and as Chris said, irrespective of any rent regulations or AMIs or market rate, these are some of the highest end finishes for residential buildings in all of Long Island. Here's amenity lounges, gyms, lobbies.
Now, the other thing we did is we prior to this, in preparing for this, we were curious where people in our last building work. What industries do they work? So, well, let's skip that for a sec. That's the shop.
Yeah.
Do we have that pie chart?
Yeah, it's at the end.
A little later.
Go to the end, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's a little small.
So,
We'll have to depend on you to decipher that.
yeah, so well, we can.
It's in here too.
So we'll hand it to you.
Yeah.
Famous pie chart.
So, here you go.
Counselor Gathers used to always get the red slice, didn't you? I know you did.
So about what is it? About 45% of the residents in our building work in the healthcare industry
And the
and
education
the
industry.
education industry. In the healthcare industry, the big hospital system on Long Island, well, now there are multiple, but Northwell Health is a big employer. And when people apply for the apartments, they have to fill out applications. We do background checks. We want to see that they have good jobs, steady jobs, and they have to, put down who their employer is, what their position is, etc. And only a small percentage of the people, is from in the manufacturing industry, retail industry, only a small percentage of people who are retired.
And you manage all your properties.
We do. Matter of fact, when we opened up these buildings, we hired a third-party manager, and they weren't doing the job to our satisfaction. We fired them, we hired another one, a major national one. They weren't doing to our satisfaction, so we took on managing it ourselves.
What percentage of the,
Smaller buildings than we typically, compared to our New York City buildings. So we thought that maybe a third-party manager could do it more efficiently, but they couldn't.
what percentage of the veteran housing do you have for this?
For the E building, how many veterans do we have living in the building?
There's 14 veterans in this building. The building is about 125 units or so, so let's call it 10% roughly are veterans.
Is that in each building or just for this one specifically?
I'd have to get back to you.
I don't
It's-
know what's in the first two buildings. This one, we were pushing more to try to find veterans to fill out applications and.
Good. Okay.
Zarek, if you want to go back a few, we can get into some more details and some of the economic development realities that we've been able to garner in Wyandanch and some unique things that frankly we're very proud of. The first is what's called First Source, which is a job training program that we have worked in partnership with the town of Babylon on, whereby we provide training for local residents in the construction trades, and then they are able to secure jobs with the subcontractors that help build the building. So this is a smattering of some of the firms that have hired local employees through the First Source job training program, and all of these logos and subcontractors were folks that help build the buildings in the community. So it's a great economic driver. It's a great uplifting, job training program, and sort of a really nice partnership between ourselves, the contractors, and the community. Again, staying on the job front, between the 4 buildings constructed, in terms of man hours worked, is the equivalent on the construction side to 240 full-time jobs. Within the First Source program that I just described briefly, it's related to over 60,000 man hours of employment. And then we also have a targeted MWBE utilization within the companies that are hired to build the building, which has resulted in contracts to those groups of over $9 million during the construction of the projects.
It's primarily a union job, I imagine, right?
No, the
It's a mix.
first two buildings were 100% union, and it was too expensive. So
That'll happen.
then what happened?
I said that'll happen when you pay people like
Yeah,
what
and
they're worth.
HFA, both those buildings were pushing back on us. They said,
Yeah.
you know, why are your costs higher than everyone else's? And the answer was it was union construction. Now we do it open shop, so it's a lot of union, but not 100%.
So would this, the same process?
It would, this up here, yeah, we would do open shop.
Okay.
Again, this is a chart, and again, we'll leave the leave behind of the specific income breakdowns among the three buildings. We didn't include the senior building here, so we have lettered them because it's going to be a large master plan project. So buildings A, B, and E, you can see here, 300 units, AMI ranges between 50% all the way to 110%, and then market. So the column on the right, shaded in gray, shows that 17% of the units are at market rate. Over 25 of them are between 90 and 110%, and then the balance, about 60%, 55% are between 50 and 60%. So, applying this mix to the AMI levels locally here, results in average incomes north of $50,000. So it's workforce housing. Again, as Chris mentioned, and Eric, the next slide shows the pie chart. Roughly half of the tenants in the buildings are in the healthcare and education space. So a lot of nurses, a lot of school administrators, guidance counselors, teachers, and again, really very few, are really using that train and commuting to Manhattan. It's people working in suburban jobs, schools, hospitals, insurance companies locally.
And again, this is preliminary, but
Right.
we had our architect King look at the site, look at the topography. We like the concept that we have in Wyandanch, where there are buildings surrounding the park. That's what we designed here. They're long buildings. You put a lobby in the middle. There'd be two wings, and then we have the manufacturing buildings at the bottom of the site.
I'm familiar with what you do. You do great work. In fact, I'm familiar because Jim Lorenzo actually showed me your stuff.
Okay.
And I appreciate him for doing that. So I'm familiar with it. I think our, and if any of my colleagues want to chime in, I think our issue is not only that you're a good builder and your things and what you build looks great. It's I think we're talking about we need some more information regarding exactly who's going to live there. Also, I got some questions regarding the financing here too. How much? I mean, what do you? Can you give me an estimate on what the investment would be up there?
Per building, each of these buildings are about 200 units, about
$75 million a building.
Yeah,
roughly.
about 200,000 square feet.
That's the non-union figure or the union figure?
Open shop.
Yeah, open shop. Okay.
The great thing about the HFA program is that the buildings we built in Wyandanch, without HFA tax credits, the rents would be double.
So did you like 4%, 9%? How's that work?
We did two of the buildings 4%, two of the buildings 9%.
Okay. Did you have a pilot agreement down there?
We did.
You have a pilot agreement for that. So the county gave you a pilot agreement, whatever county is that down there. Did you also have a shelter tax agreement that like we have here in the city?
Just an IDA pilot.
How long was that?
It had to be the same length of time of HFA's regulatory agreement, so it was 30 years.
30-year pilot
30
agreement?
30 to 35 years, yes.
Okay. And you acquired the property or the property was given to you, right?
We were designated the master developer. We enter in, when we break ground, that parcel, we ground lease, and they don't give us fee title until the building is up and occupied.
Because here the contract, sort of the contract, the paragraphs we got was like $20,000 a unit you agreed to pay us,
Right, we're paying.
depending on all the units. But you're asking, but you'll ask for a pilot from CITA and probably try to get a shelter tax agreement too, which is, I don't even know if
I
you can do that.
think we're suspecting either or, so,
It's an either or because it says and or in the contract.
well, yeah, so it's or basically, right? So if if it's determined through the IDA that it's not the right fit, it gives them the opportunity to potentially do a shelter agreement. But our understanding is that we wouldn't be able to, obviously we wouldn't do both.
Right. So the state's coming in to clean the property, which which is great. I mean, obviously, I worry a little bit about the fairness of issue here, because when we initially, I don't even know what we were, myself and Ms. McKenna and all of us were on like an advisory council, I guess. Is that what we call it, advisory council?
Well, it was a committee, yeah.
was a committee, okay.
It operated similar to an RFP committee. There just wasn't an RFP.
Right, and that, that didn't come up. I'm the chair of the County Industrial Development Agency, and of course, the UTEP does allow for something like this, but your UTEP, of course, allows for the CITA does, right?
Right.
Okay. And so that, and whatever would be more conducive, or would you ask for both of them?
I mean, I don't suspect, and Commissioner OJ can probably speak more authoritatively about this. I don't suspect we would look to do a combination.
Commissioner OJ, do you want to come up here and speak authoritatively?
I'm not even sure if we could do a
I
combination.
tried to pull it off for
pilot.
years, but
Hey, Counselor, Matt OJ,
have.
Commissioner of Assessment. We don't anticipate going that route. The contract does include the and/or phrase to include different agencies' approval. Could go to CITA for mortgage and sales tax exemptions.
Right.
Could go the
who
shelter.
appoints all the members of CITA? I think it's sort of like the mayor, isn't it? Yes. Yes, the mayor.
That's
Correct.
how one could characterize it.
Yeah, okay.
Keeping in mind that the shelter rent is on the table, is permissible through the contract, that does require council approval, with no ambiguity there.
This is a pretty good deal. You're clean, the property's clean, shelter tax, plus a pilot.
No, certainly not plus, either or on the pilot through CITA versus the shelter rent. We would not be piggybacking one on the other.
Okay. My colleagues have any questions? Since we cleared that, the financial thing up, I think.
So we had an appraisal done on the property, obviously.
Oh, you did?
We did. It came out to $19,000-$20,000 a door. As far as if we do the project through HFA, they cap our debt service coverage ratio when the building's up, so they want us to be below a 1.15. They don't want the developer making too much of a profit, so they really cap what we can make on these projects.
Sure.
The first two buildings in Wyandanch, we lost money.
Okay. Infrastructure.
Yep.
Who's going to mourn that? Will they board all the infrastructure costs?
Not all of it. So the way that we structured our proposal with the state of New York was we had, basically a rough estimate for what we thought the demolition would cost. But then we also knew we might have other costs. In particular, because right now, as you all know, the site is really laid out around that one single 600,000 square foot building. So it doesn't have a lot in terms of internal roadway. It certainly doesn't have a lot in terms of water and sewer infrastructure that would be needed to service all of these types of buildings on the site. So we actually kind of shot for the moon when we when we made a request of the state. So our ask of $29 million, it did include estimates for the demolition, any remediation that would be needed after demolition, and then other site infrastructure work, in particular to extend sewer and water lines, to put in a couple of new access roads that would service the buildings, and then potentially some city lighting, because if the access roads are new, like a new city road, for example, we'd want our same city lighting lining that street, and potentially sidewalk along the city street. But any other infrastructure that would be pertinent to the buildings would be the responsibility of the developers. So parking structures, parking lots, sidewalks, that type of stuff would, they would do as a part of the development of the parcels.
Okay. So infrastructure, taxpayers will take care of, basically.
New York State will pay for that.
Okay.
I have a question on that note.
Sure,
too.
Councilor
So
Schultz.
that $29 million is great, but what happens if we go over that amount? We need more money. Who covers that part of the cost?
So, I mean, that would largely have to be renegotiated between the city and the developers at that point, or with the state. I mean, I suspect, as with a lot of economic development grants from the state, they don't necessarily go above and beyond what they offer. So, that said, I think we'd look to, discuss with the developers and figure out if, how we're going to do that. But I think we feel like the 29 million estimate, it was done about 8 months ago, so it's, it's not too old. We tried to, of course, make sure that number was very conservative to the extent that we could. So, I mean, I think we feel relatively confident that 29 million, unless something like really outlandish is discovered, after remediation, we feel fairly confident that would cover it.
And I sort of got a policy question of the deputy mayor, and maybe Michael can chime in here. A bunch of us, many of us counselors, have been very supportive of the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative and the infill projects. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the dramatic change in our neighborhoods mm-hmm. by building single-family and two-family homes and allowing people to own homes. Mm-hmm. And I just was down at Woodland Avenue the other day, where basically there's 15 houses at home headquarters, and we've been very successful.
Looks like a whole new neighborhood.
Housing Visions, Empire Housing, everybody. Mm-hmm. But this seems to be a change because, I sit on the land bank. I'm the chair of the land bank, mm-hmm. and we had 2 projects come before us for 60 units apiece. Mr. DeVito, a developer, was presented to neighborhood groups on East Kennedy Street and West Onondaga Street, and they were unanimously opposed to these large buildings. Unanimously. Now, this area will be 10 times larger. Right. So I'm wondering, is this a shift in policy because I think my belief is to rebuild the neighborhoods by single-family and two-family houses like we've been doing. I know it takes longer, but it's worth it because I've seen the change. So,
well, first of all, I'm happy that you're in agreement about the value of single-family houses because we don't get that encouragement from everyone. So I'm glad to hear that. And it is transformational. This is not a shift. We have been, I think, very diligent in a mix of both. Housing Visions, who we all welcome as a wonderful LIHTC partner of us, they don't do single-family housing.
No, they don't do owner-occupied, excuse me. I know that. They do rental.
Right.
They do smaller buildings than this, obviously.
And I think that the difference between Salina Street is the topography here, the amount of land we're talking about, as opposed to it wasn't just the multifamily development along there. There were questions about how is it going to be managed, and there was questions about actually the composition of the units, which what was proposed was not mixed income.
Mayor, the prohibitive factor.
Deputy, please.
Sorry. You know what? I've been here so long, I can call everybody mayor, I mean, the prohibitive factor in our initial RFPs was the cleanup of that property. That was the reason people didn't send in. I mean, you're talking 5 or 6 million, it's 600,000 square foot building. That I remember we wanted to use for swing space years ago when we redid the schools. It's a disaster, and it's a brownfield and whatever. But I mean, that changes the paradigm, the cleanup of that property, in my opinion.
Counselor, if I could just, respectfully say, every developer went through the same process to bid on the site, and any developer could have had the creativity and foresight to propose demolition, certainly. But the reality is, we got several offers that, could have proposed it, didn't propose it, didn't have the experience working with, in public-private partnerships with the state, with local governments to get projects like this done. And, the reality too is that there's a very, I think, there's a very nice purchase price associated with this offer. We talk about, is this a good deal? And there's lots of things that make this good. It's not just about the monetary return for the city. But as a city, we've been trying to prioritize the revenue from selling city-owned property. You know, this proposal, not just the residential part, but especially when you factor in the commercial part as well, 8 times more in revenue to the city than any other single proposal we received.
On the front end.
On the front end, sure.
The back end, you know, with all the tax credits and everything
Every
else.
developer would need massive tax credits to get this deal done. There's no question about that. So, you know, the tax credits are going to be standard for redeveloping this site regardless of who does it. But this was the only, you know, development team that saw something other than an institutional residential use for the site. It has residential, but it also has, you know, what we think is a very promising commercial component on the other half. We're obviously not ready to take that to council yet, but we hope to by the fall. And it does have, you know, a substantial remuneration for the city. I think that's a key thing here. You know, we all, you know, would like to get our property into productive use. We'd all like to see it on the tax rolls. This does that, certainly, but it also compensates the city in a way that I don't think we've ever seen from the sale of city property. So I just want to point that out. You know, I think, you know, we haven't really hit that on the head yet. Even if they develop, you know, the bare minimum of housing units we're talking, that's a $6 million, you know, payment to the city that we can use for all kinds of services and programs for our residents. If they build the maximum amount, that's $12 million. So when we start adding up the numbers, we are looking at a $29 million grant from the state, potentially a $12 million sale price for the residential piece, and another $3 to $4 million sale price for the commercial piece. You know, hundreds of new jobs, hundreds of quality housing, you know, a mix of affordable and market rate. It's, you know, I think we can obviously debate the merits of some of the details, the numbers. We will get detailed numbers during the due diligence period to share with you all. But there's no question, I think, in my mind and from the administration's perspective, that this is the best deal we were proposed for this site.
See, I'm not convinced that this is the best deal we can get. I'll be frank with you. And I'm not knocking these guys at all. But I mean, with what's going to happen up at, probably be announced pretty soon up in north of the city, you know, I think we're going to need housing, but we're going to need all sorts of housing. So I'm not convinced that this is the best deal, especially, as I mentioned before, the prohibitive factor in this RFP was the cleanup of that massive building.
Councilor, you and your parties are doing what you are elected to do. You are asking the questions needed for this particular site and for the proposal. We're all in agreement that we have to move on and get that quality of life debacle that was left in our hands out of the way of that neighborhood in this city. You are asking the questions your constituents elected you to answer. We are proposing to you that we believe we have found an excellent partner that can get this city and that neighborhood where we need to be.
Okay, I appreciate that. You know, before we end, Councilor Green, you have something? Yeah, come on.
Yep.
Councilor Green.
All right, so just so I understand, the commercial portion, that'll be subdivided in a separate parcel? That's how it works? Yes. Okay. So, and I know Councilor Hogan alluded to this, but the buildings, I understand it's just a site plan now, but can you tell us a little more about, you know, what types of units it'll be, what's the height of these, just any more details on it?
They will be 4 or 5 story buildings, a mix of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s. In the contract, there's a minimum amount of 3s. We like building 3s, you know, for families.
Section B.
And, you know, we once we get further design, we'll show you how the mix is turning out, but it'll be a minimum of, I think it's
10% for each bedroom.
And how big will the buildings be?
5 stories?
I think
4 stories?
I think, yeah, 4 stories.
5 stories.
And so would the buildings be all residential, or would there be any commercial components too?
There would not be a commercial component to those 3 buildings that are shaded in blue.
And with this preliminary, did you come up with a percentage of the affordable housing? That's one thing that I would like to know about that.
The first building we would build pursuant to HFA's program,
Well, what is that requirement? I'm not familiar.
It's a mix of 30, 50, 60, 80, 90.
Okay.
We'll give out the books. You'll see what we've done in Wyandanch. It could be, and it's been different for the A, B, and E building. Take a look at it, and we can have further conversations as to what you think is most appropriate for the neighborhood.
There's not a hard and fast rule with the agencies in the program, so if there was, we would just adhere to that and we could describe that. But so it's a flexible discussion, conversation with them, and the full financing package and source. And
Gotcha.
the best we can do is give you the representative example of what we've completed to date, which we've done.
So would there be something that if the council had,
I would think that we would need a lot more information. I would like a breakdown of the AMI per building. I would like a few things.
We have that in there.
Well, not, you don't have it like.
No, I'm just saying, what we provided you, and we're open to discussing what you want these buildings to be, but what I provided you was what we've done
in the past.
Correct.
Right. So what would come out of the due diligence period would be a breakdown of the proposed unit mix of affordability that would be a part of that development plan that, as it states right now, it's on page, I think, 3 of the contract. Right now, it is written that the administration has the right to approve that plan. Like I said, I think we're open to negotiating that with council. If council would like approval right for that plan, we can certainly discuss that. But that's when we would have those details. I think as far as purchase agreements go, which is, honestly not uncommon, the developers, before they put additional monetary resources into planning and scoping for those buildings, they would like, a commitment from us that we're interested in partnering with them on this project. Obviously, we wanted to make sure we had the ability to potentially reject that plan if ultimately we can't come to agreement on the appropriate mix from an income perspective.
And I would like something substantive from the state regarding the cleanup.
Right. So I met with
specifically.
I met with Dan Kalinsky yesterday. He's waiting to get some final information from Albany. They will put an incentive proposal for the city together that ultimately we would have to agree to and sign. So they are working on it, and I suspect in the next probably 4 to 6 weeks we'll have those details in place. They've just been a little delayed with other stuff in Albany, of course. So we don't yet have the grant disbursement agreement in place with them, but I think we'll have those details, like I said.
Okay, I'm coming up to my hour mark. And before I leave, I want to recognize the president of the Tipperary Hill Association, Janice McKenna, who also was part of this process.
Right.
So Janice, do you want to say something, anything?
Not at this point.
Okay, so.
I just got one question in respects to the Albany's developers here. The project that you have been involved with, you've completed all of them once you sign your name on that contract, correct? And also,
we've never not finished a building. We've never been sued on a guarantee. We've never renegotiated a loan. We've never been sued on a guarantee to completion. We completed it all. I don't doubt that there are other developers who could be interested in this. This is a prime site in Syracuse. Mm-hmm. We deliver. We do what we say. And with Wyandanch, we were one of 2 bidders. No one was interested in Wyandanch. I mean, think about the number of developers who were downstate. We were one of 2 who bid on it. And you can talk to the county exec, you can talk to the town supervisor. We delivered what we said we would, and on the timeline that they allowed us.
works for me.
You finished, councilors? I appreciate you folks being here, and I'll call this meeting at an end.
Thank you.